I was conceived in a short past.
What should we watch next? Oh, yeah, actually, I was gonna show you this. Speaking of North Korea owes Sweden $6 billion, and accumulating interest too, because of Volvos. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. I'm gonna watch her video. I'm gonna see if there's any other video on this. No. I might as well just cover this on stream right now. So, funnily enough, in history, there's been two record cases of cars that were stolen by dictatorships, and money is still owed to the manufacturers and nations of said said car makers. Two cases. First case recorded was North Korea, because North Korea, in the late 60s, early 70s, grew a diplomatic bond with Sweden. Because remember, Sweden has always been a neutral country. Well, not always be neutral, but basically they trade with the highest bidder. They will manufacture for whomever is paying. They did this with Germany in the Second World War. They also manufactured for English in the Second World War too. Basically, they were selling to both sides. And during the Cold War, Sweden famously was neutral. Being able to have, for example, ABBA perform in both Poland and in England on the same tour, because they were able to play into the cards of diplomatically allowing their people to basically traverse amongst these nations, playing both sides as a weird National Socialist, formerly National Socialist government. Sweden thought and somehow saw North Korea during the 70s, because during the early 70s, post-Korean War, North Korea, for the shortest time, because of the sheer backing of the USSR and China later on, North Korea was initially more prosperous than South Korea, which was always a poorer region, even underneath Imperial Japan's rule of Korea during that time. South Korea was far more devastated and didn't have as much infrastructure as compared to the North. So the North initially got a good start ahead, and Sweden thought, well, if we can trade with the North, we'd have a lucrative in-market to buy and sell products and goods, and typically heavy machinery and automobiles to this developing nation. Famously, Volvo sold them 1,000, was it 1,200, 1,200, or just 1,000 Volvo 144s. Base models, of course. Volvo sold them these cars as a way for North Korea to have transport for staff cars and for taxis for Pyongyang. Well, North Korea never paid that debt they owed them. And I'm going to show you right now from this article by the parallels on NPR, by Danny Hajek, how 1,000 Volvos end up in North Korea and made a diplomatic difference. Now, granted, I am reading this article, but I know about the full story of it. Get the fuck out of here. So, Volvo sold these 144s, and the 144 was the initial square Volvo. Was like the first of the compact square Volvos that would lead the generation of how we know Volvo is today, or how Volvo's image was made through the more modular square design body cars. The 144 is actually a really good platform. It's a great handling, especially the coupes, the coupe. It's a great handling short wheelbase platform. Famously, it has the red block motor in it, which is the unkillable motor that made Volvo's reputation for reliability so known across the world. I think it was the B18 2FT motor. 2F motor. It's not T, because the T would be turbocharged. B18 2F and B20. These motors are a iron block design And Swedish metallurgy, of course, is second to none in the world. And they were heavily understressed. They could handle hundreds more horsepower than they're built for, but they kept them at like 100, 110 horsepower. And turbocharged models got like 124, 140 maximum. Like they were understressed to the ninth. But Volvo decided that they would be part of this operation with Sweden. Sweden kind of roping the company in to sell and helping to bolster trade amongst Sweden and North Korea. But what happened is that North Korea refused to pay the debt and completely closed all tabs on it on their end. Sweden still has a debt held out to them to this day for the heavy machinery and infrastructure equipment and the Volvos that they sold to North Korea. And there's still a tab open to this day, but of course it's never going to be paid. About 70 million worth of products. And they were, I believe, one of the last countries to have a diplomatic embassy in North Korea before they inevitably left in 2001, as is shown here. And to this day, these Volvos and these pictures, this is from 2013. You can see the age is beginning to show, but the car is still trundling along. These Volvos are still running today as taxis in North Korea. They're slowly being replaced by Chinese cars, but these are still running as the taxis of North Korea to this day. Slowly whittling and being cannibalized down and being replaced with Chinese parts, but they are still running. It is a strange occurrence of these cars still being about, because North Korea in its own is like this frozen in time landscape that's just never moves, never really seems to move in motion. It's like, once again, it's the Hermit Kingdom, but the idea of 1,000 cars of these old Volvos, I mean, once again, being a Volvo enthusiast myself, these 144s are really, really, like, the 140 series is just a platform, like, you have to see it to believe it. The 142 was famously, where I get my parts from is IPD USA, and it was their first race car they put out as, back in the 70s, as their first sponsored race car to promote their company. And the owner built and tuned up the car to about, I believe, is 250 brake horsepower, naturally aspirated. But these things are very reliable and very fun to drive compact platforms. And just seeing these here is just, it's a weird fracture in time that these exist, like in North Korea. I know I'm just kind of prattling on, but like the whole story itself is just bizarre. It's all a lot of more diplomatic, like, you know, trade in diplomatic, like, lost translation, lost their paperwork of how things went about. Basically, North Korea just, put in simply, just played a bluff of like, oh, we will pay you. We're not paying you. Once they got what they wanted. And then they refused to pay outright. You know, that, yes, that's still, their tab is still accumulating interest, and they're still have that tab open for them, and the debt, they're not going to pay it. They're never going to. North Korea, they're in their own little world. It's basically like Kimmy's little island resort, or little nation resort to himself, and everyone else is a slave to him. It's his little plantation. But the second thing is that, surprisingly, this was actually the first time a automotive manufacturer got fleeced by a socialist dictatorship. However, it wouldn't be the last time, because in the early 80s, and this is something I have personal experience with, Saddam Hussein requested a fleet of taxis for his Iraq, as he was a techno-socialist. And he wanted a rapid development of Iraq, and to meet the new road infrastructure that he was trying to build, he wanted more modern cars, a bit more luxury. Strangely enough, to the Middle East, not all the time, but in parts of the Middle East, typically around the around Persia, the Persian era, the Persian Gulf, General Motors cars are seen as luxury items. American cars in general are seen as luxury items. And Iraq, before the Ayatollah War of 1984, or before 1981, requested a bill of sale for General Motors to sell them a fleet of taxis. And they requested, in particular, one car. Well, they could afford, but that was also luxurious enough for themselves. And these were the 1980 year Chevy Malibu. And these Chevy Malibus were to be painted in rustic gold or rustic brown gold. And these Malibus were custom fitted for operation in Iraq. Even at this time, while the United States didn't have the best relation, of course, naturally didn't have the best relationship with Iraq, but even at this time, it was really like about to go to war with the Ayatollah. They were in Iran, they were pissed off. So, but General Motors really wanted this deal. And we'll get to who took the deal in a sec, but the taxis were to be specifically designed for Iraq. They would be as simplistic as possible, but with some few altercations for luxury that would tell them apart from every other Malibu on the road. These Malibus were, I'm just going to pull this up here. These 1981 Malibus were very simple. They were the four-door sedan version. I'm going to be reusing Haggerty as my go-to source for this one briefly, but they were to be the sedan version because they were to be powered by the 3.8 liter V6, and most infamously would have a 3-speed manual transmission made by Saginaw for the car. The bench seats were made of cloth. Once again, this was like poverty spec Malibu, but with heavy-duty sports suspension for rally or for heavy road use, an AM/FM radio for infotainment for the taxi driver and for the passengers, and strangely enough, two things that would make it illegal to sell within the States and Canada. Rear defrost delete, because over here we have, winter, so frost and fogging of windows causes poor visibility, so we have to have the heat vents that run up to the windows to defrost them. These vents were deleted from the car in favor of a standard, and this was considered at the time a luxury trim item. I remember back when this was a luxury trim item to be optioned for vehicles. AC. Because, of course, in Iraq, it's stinking hot. They don't want to have 65 air. They're a developed nation in their mind. So they should have air conditioning. And also, to duly note, 3-piece center hubcaps. Now, how do I know this without even reading the article here? Well, your boy Sirius Kovac had the pleasure of working on a Iraqi taxi. And my boss, who at the shop I was at, came out, well, actually our secretary, she used to work on them back in the day. And she came out jumping in joy because she asked me, does it have an inline 6? I'm like, yes. Does it have this? She's like, that's the Iraqi taxi. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? These Malibus were meant to be sent off to Iraq. And what happened was, since the United States in themselves would not export to Iraq, it was, of course, with embargoes placed on and trade bans placed on Iraq, General Motors circumvented this by using Canada and the Oshawa manufacturing plant to build the fleet of 25,000 Iraqi taxis, shipped them to Halifax, and start shipping the order out to Iraq. But what happened was, in 1981, is that half the order made it to Iraq, and then Saddam cut the order and refused to give payment. That meant that 12,500 Iraqi taxis were left in Halifax Harbor. Now, what would a company like General Motors do? Take the hit, and scrap them all. Well, that's what modern General Motors would do. Instead, back when, they sold and distributed the Iraqi taxis amongst the dealer networks and sold them at a bargain bin discount. And they advertised it. Now, what you need to know about these Malibus is that it runs on the General Motors W body. And the W body is what basically any rear-wheel drive car General Motors has had since the early 50s up until the late 90s ran on. Trans Am, Firebirds, Camaros, Skylarks, Cutlasses, everything. They ran on the same platform and frame. Meaning that you could swap in any engine. Of course, even these were carbureted too, so there was no electronic fuel injection. These engines were stupidly simple just to swap in with something else. So people would swap in these sleeper shitbox Malibus, big block Chevy motors and Ford motors, and just drag race the shit out. They make them sleepers. Almost every Malibu got molested to a degree, to the point they were no longer the Iraqi taxis. They were dirt cheap. Except for the survivors, for the people who owned them. As I was saying, though, I got to work on one of these things. I got to disassemble tires and do a full oil change and fluid service on one of these things. And I got to drive it. And I drove this thing. And this thing is, you get up to first gear, you have to go to about 20 miles per hour before shifting to second gear. The gearing is so damn long in these taxis. And it's 3 on the floor. It's 3 on the floor with 1 reverse gear. And the reverse gear loves to pop out on you, because the Saginaw unfortunately had this problem with the reverse shift detent, is that when you try to shift it into reverse, it would actually pop out on you constantly. And it was something they actually had to send over technissans to Iraq, from Canada to Iraq in the late 80s, to try and remedy, because this was a recall from Saginaw themselves on the transmission, because they started realizing there was problems with these transmissions. So they have second gear and reverse lockout and pop out during operation. So I had one that had not even got the warranty service done to it. And this thing was such, I don't know how to describe it, right? You know, it smells like, it was post-carbureted era, so it was post-fuel emission crisis, so it didn't stink of emissions. But when you drive these things, they're slow, they're sluggish, they are horribly slow. But it feels like you're floating on a couch as you're driving. Just this, you don't even feel the ground. The suspension is so just like, it feels like you're in a boat on a gentle wake, like on a small lake, and there's a small wake of the waves coming in, and it's this very flowing, rocking motion you get, and it just lumbers and steers. Like, have you ever seen old like cop movies and police chases where the cop cars just like roll right over to the right, the old Crown Vics? And I'm not talking about the Panther bodies, I'm talking about the really old Crown Vics. That's what this thing felt like driving. It was like a boat, even though it was a mid-size sedan. And like, I felt like the shit. I don't care, no one would have cared about it. It was like some old Malays era car. I felt like I was king of the world driving this thing. That was my white boy summer. That was my Operation White Boy Summer, driving Saddam's taxi. But famously, about the story of the Iraqi taxi, it was often forgotten about, is that in memoirs of people who visited Iraq, or embassy members of war in Iraq, the Iraqi taxis were actually not even used as taxis at all. They were given out as awards to officers during the Ayatollah War, or as ceremonial posthumous awards to families of those lost in the war. And the word Malibu in Arabic, and the certain dialect of Arabic that is spoken in Iraq, can often be mistaken for the word Mabibu, which is to mourn, and is also an onomatopoeia, or there's also another word, I forget what it is, but it's an onomatopoeia for a woman that's wailing from loss. So these were considered the widow's car in Iraq. If you actually watch old footage of the 2003 Iraq invasion, you can still see some of these taxis still rolling around, because remember, it's a dry climate, and these are, while it is an American car, General Motors has Saudi Arabia operations that basically get them parts to Iraq. Like Saudi Arabia was even dealing and selling these parts to Iraq to keep these things operational. Like it's money being traded. It's just good business, right? At day's end. But these shitbox taxis, 25,000 were there. So 12,500 made over to Iraq. 12,500 remained over in Canada, and it's a Canadian only thing. And going through, like, there's tons, it's become more and more of a popular thing, or it's become more of a known thing to the United States, to the Americans, as we're starting to get some weird nostalgia for the old, Bush era administration, like in a weird contrived way. These cars are starting to pop up, as interesting, as like, you know, as like collector's items and like as like memorabilia. Looking right here, you can see these things were sold in conversion to today's dollars, $16,600 USD or $22,300 Canadian for a brand new car with AC. And once again, mind you, air conditioning was a luxury item, so you got these things for dirt fucking cheap back then. And I couldn't describe to you, like, yeah, the plastic and vinyl were cheap on the inside, but like this is cloth and like shag carpet interior with this golden brown color. I think this is actually the tag. No, this is not the. Holy fuck, is it? That actually might be the one I drove. That actually might, or it's the same color as the one I drove. No, it's not the same one, but it looks to be the same one I drove, like exactly like this, same color, same everything. This thing is such a weird shitbox, but people don't realize that that these things exist, and they're so weird. I want to make a video on this, but like I didn't think I would ever be enough. So I feel like this stream clip will be enough to cover everything I want to say. But like I'm gonna post like links in the description for like further reading. But and by the way, these things are G bodies, by the way. But either way, W body, G body, they still swallow the same engine in their engine bay. But like you guys, like, honest to God, dude, it is so weird. Like, it's something that I feel like people should, like, look into. These things were so strange. And I find it funny now, because, like, I'm thinking to myself, because I'm a fan of Hina Bobina, the VTuber. And she opened, Desert Storm trading cards on stream, but then your boy over here got to drive an official Iraqi taxi. So, VTuber's ties to Iraq and Saddam Hussein are pretty strange if you think about it. But, yeah, no, this here, let me pull this up again. This here is just a nut, like this guy's modified it and swapped the engine in this one. Like, it's no longer the original. Like, I don't think this one is the original Iraqi taxi in Line 6. He's put in a new big block with Edelbrock equipment on it, but like I don't know how else to describe it. It is such a strange like thing, and like you ask anyone of like that was born like Gen X or boomers or even early millennials, they can remember this. And ever since I drove that, I only drove it once, very shortly. I want to own one of these things so badly. I want to drive it because, like, in just that moment, you feel like you're teleported back to the 80s, like in your own time place. Like you're just in your own era. None of this like faux nostalgia, like it's flashing neon lights. No, this is like backwoods 80s. Like this is just some real interesting shit. Anyway, moving on from me prattling about cars, let's get back into doing some more videos.
Even if you ain't a bitch, you still a nigga.